talk to you about a few things, like diversity and inclusion within the climate action framework. This includes social permaculture, having a systems theory approach to analyzing problems and structuring solutions, as well as the importance of intersectional movements for increasing efficiency. I want to encourage you to decolonize your mind, movements, and organizations. And I also want to talk to you about trauma stewardship, which is a radical act of social change. Let me start with this disclaimer. You wouldn't try to conduct an intricate chemistry experiment without consulting a chemist. Similarly, there is an understanding that this field of social justice or education to counter oppression is one that necessitates research and engagement to make appropriate or useful assessments of it. If you have not studied in this field, especially if you hold unearned privileges, it is important to understand that what you are giving is often an uneducated opinion that can be both hurtful and detrimental to the goal of liberation. So in many cases, it doesn't hurt to defer to recognized knowledge in the field. I call this historical and scholarly versus individual opinion-based. At the same time, people who have been subjects of oppression will have individual experiences and need to be honored. That's the trauma stewardship aspect. So if you, for instance, are a white person that's taken a few social justice courses, don't presume to tell, say, a person of color about their experience. Furthermore, by educating yourself, especially if you have the privilege to, you show that you care enough to make an effort and take your part in the responsibility of dismantling oppression. Also, contrary to popular belief, this is not a process that simply ends. You don't read a few articles, take a couple classes, hear a speech, and say, well, I've done my part, or I know all I need to. Greta says it best. We don't really need your angst. We need your action. So you have to have continued engagement. I, as a social justice educator and master's scholar, still learn new things every time I delve into this material. And I acknowledge that I say all of this from the privilege of education. So if you're unable to educate yourself due to a lack of resources or access, or even educational inclination, know that there are 1,000 opportunities as you progress through any day when someone you cross paths with who is socially disadvantaged could use a hand or an ally or to be seen or heard. And we all need to think more critically about those past opportunities. When I go on the U-Bahn here in Germany, I'm astounded when I see someone who is blind having to fight the sea of walking traffic just to get on the train. Just an example. Let's get into permaculture. Simply put, if one thing flourishes, so does the other. By nourishing and supporting more parts of a system, it is stronger and more vibrant in its entirety. According to Diana Leaf Christian, author of the key book on intentional communities, 90% of intentional communities fail, largely because of conflict. A big part of this is just like monocrops being the antithesis of healthy ecology, monoculture is the antithesis of healthy communities. We need diversity, both in how we plant and in how inclusive we are to the diverse spectrum of humanity. I am strongly in the camp of not supporting dichotomies. This is not immigrant versus native or climate activist versus high CO2 footprint individual, but a spectrum of change agent and those perpetuating oppression that have yet to be awoken as change agents. I want to share a quote with you by Gus Speth. We scientists don't know how to do that. I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Have you ever heard the phrase, hurt people? Or that every action is either a request for love or an offering of love? Trying to view things through this lens may assist us in engaging a revolution of the heart, not spiritual bypass where our peace and pleasure overshadows our responsibility and culpability in the struggle for equity, but innovating the revolution toward connection and healing. From Fellowships of Intentional Communities, there's this quote: "We are embedded in larger systems that do not encourage beneficial relationships. Our overarching economic system sacrifices the good of the people and the earth to the goal of achieving short-term profits. It maintains itself by fostering systems of prejudice and exploitation, racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, ageism, ableism, all those constructs that separate us and elevate some people's good over others. Those systems affect us deeply, often unconsciously, no matter how much we might deplore them and struggle against them. Understanding the whole nuance of the matrix of oppressive systems helps you better interrupt business as usual to effect positive social change." Intersectionality is an important concept to understand, and it's an approach that was largely advanced by women of color, arguing the classification or social construct such as gender, race, class, as well as others, cannot be examined in isolation from one another. They interact and intersect in individuals' lives, in society, in social systems, and are mutually constitutive. In early civil rights movements, we found racism in the feminist movement, homophobia in racial justice movements, and honestly, it still exists today. We still are finding these strong but individuated movements, each often thinking of their struggle in terms of hierarchy, that one is more important than another, rather than that each movement is mutually relevant in the pursuit of liberation. Also from the Fellowship of Intentional Communities, the key insight of social permaculture is that while changing individuals is indeed difficult, we can design social structures that favor beneficial patterns of human behavior. Just as in a garden, we might mulch to discourage weeds and favor beneficial soil bacteria. In social systems, we can attempt to create conditions that favor nurturing, empowering relationships. System thinking allows you, your organization, and communities to see the larger design, to gauge how seemingly unrelated actions have consequences. System thinking allows us to test our assumptions and resist the urge to make decisions based on opinion or limited information. Organizations that understand how interconnected complex systems work in their industry can leverage that knowledge for the benefit of their communities and goals. Asking critical questions is core to creating positive social change. We think about how much trash, fuel, or carbon our lives are generating. We should also question our biases, the basic necessities we are access to that others are excluded from. How can we leverage our privilege to co-create equality, and how our words or actions might generate suffering? Asking critical questions is really the crux of countering oppression. And in the same vein, it doesn't start and end with one question. For instance, we might, as a people, decide that we believe in the concept of fair share, but did you know that certifying fair trade operates within capitalistic paradigms? You need money for certifications, and that already hints at hierarchies of privilege. In some cases, by buying fair share certified products that lead to disproportionate pay for women and children who can't afford the certification. There is an app that will help you with that called Boycott. Let's keep in mind that you vote with your dollar. There's a difference between operating from the perspective of a colonized mind and perspectives of prioritizing ancestral knowledge. Ancestral knowledge, cultural preservation, as well as ecologically minded earth care are all forms of countering oppression. That's just a little bit, and I'd love to share more with you, so check out more of my videos. Thanks.